it's like the idea of a Christianity that doesn't produce a very evidential, like observable, measurable, tangible, different life is no Christianity at all.
Hey, welcome to Ascend the Hill with Jeremy Austill. I'm Jonathan, this is Pastor Jeremy, and welcome back from vacation.
It's good to be back, and Michelle and I did have a vacation. It was good. I've got a little bit of a tan. I was well rested. I hit Sunday morning having been on the beach all week, and I legit felt refreshed, energized on Sunday morning. I just had a lot of juice.
Yeah.
Like I was ready to go. And there's something to be said for getting away and just hitting pause. But I normally, when I come back from a trip, I'm a little anxious. I'm a little uptight because you just haven't been in your same flow of preparation. And I value preparation a ton. But for whatever reason, this Sunday, I just felt locked in. It was good.
Yeah. Well, and y'all went to the beach. So was it crowded? Was it good? Was there a lot of people out?
Well, it was good where we were.
Yeah.
Now Michelle has become like very skilled at finding us places to stay that are on the beach, but they're smaller spaces, smaller units, so that you don't have huge crowds. So we like to walk up and down the beach, and you walk up 300-400 yards up the beach, and I mean the umbrellas are 5 deep. It's just people on top of each other everywhere. Where we were, just one little line of chairs and umbrellas, plenty of space, wasn't crowded. So a lot of it is getting the right unit, the right spot on the beach, and so we've kind of found a little honey hole area, if you will. And of course, I won't be sharing what that is or where that is, but it is.
Don't need all the other people going there.
yeah. And so it'll get messed up. But yeah, it was awesome. Not a ton of people. Of course, it was just 2 of us. We're used to being on a trip with 4 of us. So really not much waiting at restaurants. It's amazing. Like I had forgotten, after Michelle and I were married for 11 years before we had kids, and now we're 14 years into parenting. And really last year and this year, we've kind of resumed taking trips, just me and her. And I had forgotten how easy it is to get into a restaurant when there's only 2 people. It's amazing. Like just going from 4 to 2, we really didn't have to wait much. Ate incredible seafood. I mean, scallops might be my favorite food.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, it's not something you eat a lot, and you really want to eat them more toward the beach, so they haven't been frozen and coming out of a bag.
Yeah.
But I love scallops. So scallops, grouper, snapper, the whole thing. It was good.
Well, that leads into what we're doing with Would You Rather today.
Okay.
And it's beach edition, but the first one leads into food, which is, would you rather eat crab or lobster?
Oh, crab, easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had some lobster and some crab this week, but not as in like I ordered lobster or I ordered crab, like toppings on fish and different things.
Yeah.
But crab meat to me is lobster, if it's overcooked, it gets dense. It kind of gets rubbery, whereas crab meat, that's not the case. And then crab meat is just sweeter, in my opinion. That's my preference. Now, I don't love ordering like crab legs because then it's just a ton of work. and you got to have some skill in making that work and actually getting good chunks of meat. But yeah, I'll go crab.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's such a bougie question to start with. Crab or lobster, so pretentious, or catfish,
Would you rather, speaking of bodies of water, the Gulf or the Atlantic?
The Gulf or the Atlantic? Oh, the Gulf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to the Atlantic a couple times, 2 or 3 times, that I can recall off the top of my head. And I mean, it's just no comparison as far as the quality of the beach, the quality of the water, just the vibe in general. I mean, I haven't been I don't think I've been to Myrtle Beach, like vacation destination. I've been in those vicinity. But the Gulf, it's hard to beat the Emerald Coast in that whole Destin area with the white sand and all that. Now, the Gulf is different on the other side of the Mississippi River. When we lived in Beaumont, we would go to Galveston,
Oh yeah.
and the water there looked like chocolate milk,
Oh.
and the sand just looked like mud. It was not pretty at all, and apparently it's because when the Mississippi River pushes into the Gulf, all of the silt and all of the debris pushes to the right. You know, if you're like looking down, which I guess it would be to the left if you're looking at a map, it pushes over toward the Texas, Louisiana side, so it makes it like kind of dingy and gross.
Oh,
and
man.
and all of the clear, fresh stuff pushes toward the Florida Gulf Coast side. So we would go to Galveston in the Gulf, and it was a completely different experience than going to Destin. But yeah, so
Would you rather the water be cold or warm? Are you like a fresh cold water?
no, I'll get warm.
Yeah.
If it's cold, I don't want to get in. And side note, I told you before we got on, we got in the ocean one time this week, and that's strictly out of, you just get in the ocean and you feel gross, not because the ocean's gross, but you're just wet.
Yeah.
And I don't love just being randomly wet, you know. And so we only got in the ocean like one time, but of course when the kids are on a beach trip with us, you feel like you're in it the entire time. You know, you got the whole pruny hands, you're waterlogged. So what was the question? I'm randomly
Cold or warm water?
Colder water. See, bro, I'm on a tangent, ain't I? So warm water. I mean, who likes getting in cold water?
I don't know. I feel like there's some of those people that it's just so refreshing.
Yeah,
you know,
those little polar plunge
Yeah.
folks that like get in the ice tubs every morning. Now, I get all that, I guess, but no, I want it warm, because when it's cold, like every layer of depth that you step out, it's like, all right, I got to get used to this. You know, I'm definitely not it's cold, just jump in and you'll get used to it person.
Yeah. The last one, would you rather be at the sunrise or the sunset on the beach?
Oh, sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah. In general, which I get up early, but in general, I like sunsets, especially in the summer. You know, if we're doing like favorite times of day, when you get into the summer and into the fall, like that late afternoon sunset-ish time is my favorite time of the day, especially in the summer. Now, when you get into late fall, winter, all of that, I prefer sunrise. Especially hunting, there's something about being out there as the earth's kind of waking up and you're starting to, which interestingly, of course, when you deer hunt, you are very conscious of trying to not be cold, and come to find out, like the coldest part of the day is typically the first hour after sunrise, because it takes that long, I guess, for the heat to really start heating up the earth. And so basically the temperature is still dropping until about an hour, and then it flips anyway.
Yeah.
I read that somewhere. That might not be true. That might be some, urban myth. But all that to say, yeah, on a beach, especially sunset.
Yeah. Well, we had a great weekend too. You mentioned it before we started talking all about the beach and vacation, but we had a great weekend too with continuing our series Parables. We were in week 3.
Yes.
And it's actually we talked about the parable of the talents. Last week was the parable of the bridesmaids, and in the actual scripture they butt up against each other. They're right. Talents is right after the parable of the bridesmaids or 10 virgins, depending on which version you're reading. So I guess a good leading question is, because they're right next to each other. I know we have the chapter headings and everything and like the separations, but are they connected at all? Are they part of a full-on thought, or are they just kind of more their own thoughts put next to each other? Is there any kind of connection between the two since they're right next to each other?
Well, you definitely, when you're reading the Gospels, you understand that you're reading somebody that is from their memory, and from information they've pulled in different spots, like Luke. They're putting together this letter, this text, this book, and I don't know that, they always prioritized chronology, as in like sequence of events. This happened when Jesus was 30 years old. This happened when he was 31. I think there's probably some things that are out of order chronologically. But you also see the writers often grouping parables together. Like there will be a succession of parables. And whether that was because Jesus literally told those parables one after the other, or the gospel writer knew because of their relational dynamic with Jesus, knew from their research and study that these parables were one and the same, or they were telling the same thing in different ways. They put them together. And so I do believe there was a great intentionality on those two parables being together. Now, I can't say with certainty whether Jesus in one sitting told the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, and then right on the heels of that, then told the parable of the talents. We don't know that with certainty. What we do know is that Matthew believed, out of the dynamic that he had with Jesus and all of his experience, that he believed those two needed to be together. And I think we pay attention to that, because you'll see other parables like the parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the prodigal, that are put together because they're all talking about the Lord looking for the lost, right? And receiving and seeking the lost and that which had been lost. And so I do believe these two parables being together speaks to us in that they are in the same vein of communication, using some different examples to tell the same truth. And for me, as I mentioned Sunday, I didn't spend a ton of time on it, but it's kind of texture of the same thought, layers of the same thought. The parable of the 10 bridesmaids with the oil being lacking, and that oil, we believe, just scripturally throughout, is this marker, this indicator of the work of the Holy Spirit, a spiritual thing, a supernatural thing. And so I believe Jesus tells that parable to indicate, if you don't handle the spiritual thing, the supernatural work of the Holy Spirit on the inside of you well, if you don't partner with it, then you're at risk of being one of the 5 that are left out. Likewise, now Jesus takes the next step and says, okay, it's not just about like that inward spiritual oil, it is about the outward expression of it, and that outward expression he would call faithfulness. Right? Stewarding your natural world, your natural gifts, your natural opportunities well. And in the same way, a person who isn't faithful with their natural world, their natural life, which for a believer, everything's sacred. There's nothing that's secular. Like, it all becomes sacred, unless we don't make it sacred, right? He's saying, hey, if you don't handle your natural dynamic well, then you're at risk of being cast out. And I think that thread of people being left out, people being cast out, weeping and gnashing of teeth is connected in both. And I think we need to pay attention to that. We need to pay attention to, I can't say definitively, although in the 10 bridesmaids, I feel very strongly that was a parable to people that would profess faith. They were in proximity to the bride. They had a measure of morality. They had the outward accessory of a lamp that would indicate that they were in the club, right? And then you look at the parable of the talents. All 3 were a servant of the master. So it's possible, again, you're talking about people that would maybe be put themselves under the heading of Christian. But they had not been a faithful servant, right? And so I am by nature a big believer in the grace and mercy of God. And I've shared in multiple settings here at Cornerstone Church and through the years that I think one of the grave mistakes that we made in Pentecostalism is in our response to, and this is stereotypical, okay? And I know that I'm speaking with a broad brush, but maybe our Baptist brothers and sisters who would, say, they wouldn't necessarily use these terms. They would say eternal security of the believer. We would slap the label once saved, always saved on it, right? I think as Spirit-filled people, as Pentecostals, if you will, at times in response to once saved, always saved. We've swung the pendulum way too far the other way, and especially in our Pentecostal history, very works-based, like very performance-based, and you basically walked around feeling like a failure all the time because you could never measure up, right? So I think that's a bad pendulum swing, right? And so by nature, I'm going to default to grace and mercy and the patience of the Lord, but I can't read these two parables and not pause and reflect on the possibility that there are people that think they're good.
Yeah.
You know, because they're in proximity to the bride, because they identify as Christian, but because they haven't stewarded the spiritual thing well, and they haven't stewarded their natural world well, their natural life well, they're going to be shocked. You know, when the master returns, they're going to be shocked. They're going to be surprised they got left out.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, that feels fearful. And there should be, to some degree, a sense of deep reverence at that God is mighty and God is judge, and I need to honor him, you know, and be very reverent and respectful of him in that way. But I also think it's really important to not lose sight of the 5 bridesmaids that got to enter glory, you know, enter the kingdom feast, and the two servants who got double and got to enter his joy. Like, the parable is every bit as much about the faithful servants and the wise bridesmaids as it is about the foolish bridesmaids and the unfaithful servant. Like, it's not about one more than the other. You know, it's about stewardship, faithfulness, tending the oil. So.
Yeah. And what was interesting, because I have the scripture in front of me, and actually the section that's right after that, and if you're preaching about this coming up, just stop me. But it's about the final judgment, and Jesus talks about separating the goats from the sheep.
Yeah.
And then he gives the famous line that people quote a lot, which is, "When I was hungry, you fed me."
Yeah.
But in this case, he says, when he's talking to people who didn't do well, he's like, "When I was hungry, you didn't feed me.
Yeah.
When I was thirsty, you didn't give me drink." And that seems to be following up in line with what we've been talking about, because he uses the same terms like weeping and gnashing of teeth, I think, in this section. But regardless, like, it seems like what you're saying with doing what we know we're supposed to do, and that level, having a level of respect, of understanding that we have been asked to do something.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me of, like, when I was a kid, during the summer months, you're home alone as a kid because parents got to work.
Yeah.
They're like, "You need to get this stuff done today."
Right.
Me and my brother would never fail to not get it done because we played video games all day.
Right.
And then the last 20 minutes, we get the phone call, "I'm on my way home." It's like, "Oh, do the clothes real quick, do all this stuff." And so it just reminds me of, like, we probably need to be the people who, we understand the retribution of our parents.
Yeah.
If we don't do the chores.
Right.
They still love us, but we know that there's a consequence if we don't do what we were asked to do during the whole day. We had time.
Yes, I think it is terrible hermeneutic, terrible theology, and in many ways a modernization of the gospel that's dangerous when we don't have a sense of gravity and weight, like a seriousness about consequence.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible is filled with consequence. Like, the Bible is filled with, here's the path I've laid out for you. It's a good path. It's a life-giving path. It's a safe path. It's the best path.
Yeah.
And when you deviate from this path, you're basically putting yourself in harm's way, right? And so the consequences are not God putting them on you. They are, like, you and I chose the path of consequence, right? So yeah, you can't have, in my opinion, a gospel that is absent consequence is a false gospel. Like, that's a real thing, that there is consequence. And it's, you know, some of it is, you can almost see in the tide. You know, I've only lived a certain amount of years, and so I can't speak to what it was like in the 60s and the 50s in the church, right? All I can speak to is my era of living, and it's one of the almost slippery slopes too strong because that's such a negative connotation, but some of the slippery slope of, you know, it's about relationship. Christianity is not about, quote, a religion. It's not a religion. It's about relationship, right?
Yeah.
Well, that and yeah, on the surface, I 100% agree with that. I get what that's trying to imply, all of that. But the kind of the danger of that is that we can start deciding, well, Jesus is loving and forgiving, and like it's about as long as I'm like talking to him and available to him. You know, if you're not careful, you can slip into this license or to do what you want, or maybe you wouldn't necessarily give yourself that license, but you you say, well, it's about a relationship, but like part of the relationship, there's aspects of the relationship that require doing, right?
Yeah.
And so religion always kind of gets the negative connotation of it's about works, it's about a bunch of rituals and all of that. But Jesus, in this talk that you referenced, is saying like there is some, I guess, religious aspects. Like as a religion, this is what Christianity does.
Yeah.
Like we feed the hungry, we clothe the naked, we visit those in prison. Like as a part of a religion, that's what we do. You know,
Yeah.
Pure and undefiled religion is, you know, how we handle widows and orphans. And so I point all of that out to say, I wish I could articulate it. I came across something the other day. I can't even remember who said it. And they said a really simple thing, but it stuck with me. It hit. Just like the idea of a Christianity that doesn't produce a very evidential, like observable, measurable, tangible, different life is no Christianity at all.
Yeah.
Right? A Christianity that doesn't lead us to acts of compassion, a Christianity that doesn't lead us to hard work, a Christianity that doesn't lead us to spiritual disciplines, a Christianity that doesn't lead us to greater morality, a Christianity that doesn't lead us into opposition with the ideas of the world. Like, for instance, you know, all of the unbelievable discourse that's hard to fathom, the discourse around sexuality and gender in our nation right now.
Yeah.
Well, Christianity is going to, at times, propel you into opposition with what is accepted, celebrated, normative in the world, right? And so I think it's a Christianity that coalesces, that acquiesces to the world's ideologies is no Christianity, right? So all of that to say, I think it's in some ways what Jesus was saying, like, it's not enough to be around this.
Yeah.
It's not enough to be in proximity. It's not enough to wear the label. There should be something that's evident, clear, distinctive, identifiable, observable about a believer.
Yeah. And when we get into that mindset, we understand, hey, there needs to be things about our life that are evident.
Yeah.
And so we start operating in that of like, okay, I'm going to make the most of what I've been given. I'm going to do these things.
Yeah.
The flip side is what we talked about just a minute ago, which is that pendulum between once saved, always saved, and you know, you're praying every day because you don't want to go to hell. You know, like, I think on the other side of that coin is it can be very easy to then use these things we're talking about and say, well, okay, so let me just do these things, and so I know I'm saved, but if I do these things, I'm gonna like add on, like, okay, I got the buffer, Lord, I believe in you, and I did these things, so I'm really, really saved.
Yeah.
So how do we balance doing the right thing without thinking that right thing justifies us spiritually before the Lord? Because only the work on the cross justifies. You know what I'm saying? How do we make sure we don't fall into that trap?
Well, I think there's no like textbook way to answer that. because every person is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You're a complex being, and you are working with inner dialogue, internal conversations. You're working in dialogue with the Lord, dialogue with yourself, dialogue with the best version of yourself, dialogue with the lesser version of yourself. And so there's no textbook way to answer that's unilaterally effective, other than to say that you have to learn to hold the tensions. And the tension being, I acknowledge I'm saved by grace. I'm saved by mercy. I'm saved by love, right? But as an outworking of a changed life, these things are evidence of a changed life. And at the same time, doing these things leads me increasingly into a changed life, right? So the decision to feed the hungry it's not, I wouldn't see it as a decision to secure my salvation. I would see it as a decision to honor my salvation.
Yeah.
And because, I've said during this series, we are saved. Yeah. We are being saved, and we will be saved. It's that being saved, the increasingly like Christ that we're becoming. The removal of flesh, the removal of soul issues, becoming increasingly conformed to the world instead of the patterns of this world, to the Lord instead of the patterns of this world. And so I might say, I'm going to feed the hungry, not to earn salvation, but in honor of my salvation, and to deepen the work of my salvation in me, because I am feeding the hungry as an act of selflessness, which is a defiance to selfishness that has a tendency to creep up in me as a human, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's these layers of, I don't do this to earn salvation, but I do this to honor my salvation. I do this to honor the Lord. I do this as worship.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm saved. I'm so grateful I'm saved. To me, the thought of not worshiping him with my life seems like an offense.
Yeah.
Right. And to the person that is deeply saved, they got saved. They're serious about it. They didn't just repeat a little prayer. They're in. To that person, you're so full of gratitude, and you're so cognizant and aware of what God has done for you, that worship is your pleasure, it's your delight. And it just so happens that some of the ways we worship aren't just, I'm going to go pray, I'm going to sing a song, I'm going to, hold up and read my Bible for a while. Some of the ways we worship are expressing God's nature to other people. I worship with my work, with my effort, doing my best unto the Lord. And so it's these acts are acts of worship. They're acts of honoring my salvation. And then again, to the person who's committed to the Lord, then we're committed to deepening ourselves in our faith. We're committed to deepening our faithfulness to him, and at the same time becoming increasingly like him. So I will do these things because I know these acts in and of themselves transform me. They change me. They are disciplines that come against and contend against the lesser parts of me and elevate the higher virtues in me, right? Yeah. So I think that's how I would probably articulate it. But each person has to wrestle with in their mind. I think all of it starts with the need to really settle in the foundational truth that when you are saved, you are saved. You're a son and daughter. You're a son or daughter. That's what you are. And so now I'm doing everything knowing that he's got me. I'm in. I'm not trying to earn heaven.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to earn his favor. I'm not trying to earn his affection, but I want to honor his affection. And I just want to become more and more like him. I want to become a real good reflection of him in the world. Right. So,
well, and this has been the third week in the parable series, and the last two have kind of, like we talked about, they kind of have fit together pretty well. And so where is that next step that we're going in this parable series?
Well, I'm trying to decide.
Oh, yeah?
But I'm leaning one of two ways. There are a couple of parables that speak of the kingdom of God, like a mustard seed that becomes a tree, like yeast working its way through the batch, and so there's that I might lean into, of just how the kingdom grows in the earth. Or the other is, there's another very familiar one, and it's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I'll probably do both, and I'm just not sure the sequence right now.
Yeah. Well, we want to see you this Sunday, so make sure you're here this Sunday as we continue our series Parables. If you can't be here this Sunday, make sure to watch us online. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on csnlive.org. Regardless of where you're at, whether you're on vacation, at the beach, or somewhere else, or you're just checking us out, make sure to watch us online and let us know where you're tuning in from and everything. But if there was something today that you got out of today that really spoke to you or made you think of the parables in a different way, or really jumped out at you either from the message or from today's discussion, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. But regardless, we hope you have a great week. We can't wait to see you Sunday. And if not Sunday, we'll see you online for Cornerstone Online. Have a great week.